Inktober Tanglers. This is Annie. I'm trying my best to catch up with our challenge of October, and now I am going to show you what I've come up with for days 5 and 6 on one small tile. Day 5 is Molygon by Zen-Tangle, and 6 is Heartfully by Helen Williams. And I've decided to combine the two today and work on a colored background that I do a tutorial about how to create these colored backgrounds with Lindy's Magical Shakers. They're dye powders, and I will put a link in the description for you to go to that particular tutorial if you'd like. Okay, so these are all the materials I'm going to be using today. It looks like a lot. It's just because I'm doing a tone and tone of coloring and shading for this little tile that I've chosen, and I've got an 01 Micron pen as well as an 005. Since this is such a small space, I'm going to have to be tangling in. And then I chose my Prismacolor solvent blender to blend that shading or the color layering. It's called burnishing. So let's get a start. I'm going to start with my 01 Micron and start with a nice heart that will fill out most of this tile. That's where we're going to be tangling heartfully inside. We're going to do the molygon on the outside. So let's do a molygon. I'm going to use these curves here. Molygon is a crescent shaped tangle, and I'm just going to mimic that curve. And then you go about a little bit more than halfway up, Maria says, leaving a space, a gap in your aura line, and you continue to make that same kind of crescent shape. But of course you can vary the size of these shapes. I'm going to do another one. I might turn my tile and do one this way. And then another this way. Pretend there's another one here. We're doing a full bleed tile, meaning we don't have any border on this tile. Once again, I'm going to use the curved line of the heart shape here and make my first molygon shape. Molygon is so versatile because you can just really fit it into any shape. You can be very organized about it, or a lot more erratic, kind of like I'm doing now. You can even change your direction of your molygon crescents. I'm going to change direction here. The important thing is this gap, right? This gap in between each of those crescents. I'm going to try to fill this one up completely. Going off the page. Let's see, what can we do here? Again, I'm going to follow this line, this heart shape. And I've been seeing a lot of really pretty molygons. You can vary also how sharp of a point you make. You can make them really crescent-like, like the moon, or you can round the corners however you want. Kind of more like this, kind of like those candies. I'm going to change directions here. Maybe make one sort of filling up the entire space. Let's do one here, even though it'll go off the page. And that is molygon. The fun part is going to be coming when we shade all of this. But let's do a heartfully first. So I'm going to begin heartfully by dividing my shape, my heart shape, into a grid with rather large squares because otherwise it's going to be really hard to fit the pattern within this grid. So I'm going to go 1. This is of course only going to be half, and same here. Just going to have to work with the space that we have. And I will start, let's go down here. So at least we'll have this section here that's nice and large for a grid. I am going to take out my pencil, a graphite pencil, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of a cheating help. I like to make an X with the pencil inside my square. So we want our heart point oriented toward the corner. And we have to remember that we're going to make a heart here. It's going to be rather thin because we're going to make the heart there as well. So they're going to kind of bump into each other. And if you have them too large, they won't fit. So this is looking pretty good. And I noticed that when I was doing this without those guidelines, it was a lot harder because this way I can kind of see how big that space is. Look at the lovely pattern that makes there in the center. So I'm going to do that again. Orienting to this corner here. Pretty thin. And then I'm going to complete each of these grids in the same way. This Heartfully is a beautiful pattern by Helen Williams, and I use it a lot. I'll even show you proof that I have been doing this since at least 2015 because I have it documented here in my Tangle a Day journal. And I like it, of course, around February and for Valentine's cards, etc. So it's really pretty. It looks both like a heart, but also like a flower, especially in this meta pattern that it's creating. Just lovely. I like to take them one at a time, these squares, because then I don't get so confused. Because once the meta pattern starts, you kind of ask yourself, wait a minute, where should the point go? And if you go one at a time, then you don't get confused. That's why I'm being very particular about that. See, I'm already confused here, so it's this one that I need to do. I think I just messed that up, but that's okay. Isn't that very beautiful? I just love this pattern. Oops, here's one more. Guess we could have done that another way, but we'll just wing it. Now you can also, since there really is actually space in here, I did get out my 005 pen, and you could do aura lines around things if you would like. But I am going to find these little areas where our lines cross, and I'm going to make a little dot in there. Let's see if I get them all. Here's one, and there would be one. Here's one. So that's where my lines crossed, my guidelines, my string basically. And now I'm going to go back in there and lift those lines so we can do some shading. It's going to be the fun part. So for shading, like I said, I just went to my colored pencils box and picked up some colors that look a lot like what are in the tiles, because we don't want to shade black, we want to shade the colors that are given. And always make sure your pencils are very sharp. And you can start, there's all different ways to start. You can start from light to dark. Let's make this a little bit darker. I'm going to shade my heart kind of to make it look three-dimensional. I'm shading these smaller hearts to look a little bit three-dimensional. In fact, there is still a line, a bunch of lines over here that I didn't get. So this is a pretty light pink, so I'm taking the a little bit darker pink color here, magenta I think it is. Probably should get something with a little bit of orange or gold for this area here. A little bit, something with a kind of a yellow tint, like sunburst yellow would work really well. Yeah. We always want to pick up a little bit of each of those colors that's in our tile. This has purples in it. And you can even add a little bit of the other colors that are next to it. Again, I'm seeing some graphite that I don't want in there. So I'm losing track of my heart. That's why I'm going to get out my pen and really emphasize that outer contour. One thing we could do is, once I have shaded my molygon, we could color that whole outer end, that all of that negative space. We could color it in black, which could be very cool. Might consider doing that, thinking about it while I shade this. Always layer colors. I'm going up here with a little bit lighter so that I can burnish that darker color down. And then I'm going to add some white. This is colored pencil, not generals, and I'm going to do the same thing in here. Get some nice highlights going. Really makes these look like puff hearts. This needs a little bit more. Lots of little lobes to shade, but it's worth it. Just enjoy the coloring process and watching it develop. Okay, now for these highlights and some burnishing. Burnishing, what's burnishing, you may ask if you're just joining me for the first time. That's when we basically blend our colors together on the paper. Unlike watercolor or paint, acrylic and watercolor or oils, you blend your colors on your palette and then you paint. And you can layer them up, of course, but we don't do any of the blending on a palette, but rather, as a botanical illustrator that is, that I'm speaking of my training as such, we blend after we build up our colors with our colored pencil. And then there's all different types of ways to burnish, which I go into very much in other tutorials, especially the moonberry, I think. I talk about that. So have a look at that. So I'm going to add some more highlights here and a little bit darks on the points. Really giving this some dimension. I love drawing on top of these colored tiles. It's just really forgiving, and it's fun to just keep on pulling some of the colors over. Like there is no pink really right here, but I'm pulling it in so that it's all kind of gonna fit together in the end. Here's, needs to be more purple. This molygon makes for a fun texture, right? Really. I'm going to put some more yellows in here, just even in here, just to bring some of those in from this area. And then what you probably can't see is my pretty shimmery gold. It's part of the powders. And I did show my solvent blender in my supplies list, but I'm feeling like I'm building up my color from darker to lighter, and you can burnish with your lighter colors, just like this white, right? White is another color to burnish with. So I don't think I'm going to hit it up with my solvent blender. This is what happens if you do. It does kind of seem to illuminate things a little bit more, and it takes away any of those little pencil marks, but you have to be very careful to always clean as you draw, and you try to go from lighter areas into the dark. And this is such a small tile, I almost don't feel it needs this blending. I just wanted to show you. This is another alternative. And then I do want to get my jelly roll pen out and make these white, or if you have a gold, that could be very pretty. I don't know, I think the white is picked up really nicely here. The gold would be a lot more subtle. Make sure I got them all. Oops. Smeared that one. I do see a few more little pencil lines that I can clean up later, but now I am going to go in there. I've decided. I'm going to get probably, yes, my PN to fill in the background. I think it's going to really make this pop. So I'm going to bear with me. You don't have to watch me color, but I will color it in and be back to show you what I've come up with. Well, I am liking that decision. I think that helps make my heart pop. And you could stop there. There are also a few other little things that you can do. You could go back in and really kind of do some lively line here and there. That helps this inner pattern stand out. Whoops, too much talking. And then there's one more thing you could do to make that stand out even more, is with the darker purple, just add some of that around the entire contour on the inside of the heart. Right over the top of everything else. These are all tone and tone, so we're not going to muddy anything up. Bringing a little bit down here to make that lobe kind of three-dimensional, this side, and then a little bit here. And this is where I would get out my colorless blender. I'm going to take the larger end and pull it, trying to stay away from that black line. And I'm blending, burnishing that into this other area so that it becomes more transitioned and incorporated. And there are days 5 and 6, molygon with heartfully. Here is another sample I'd like to show you. I was going to show you this one, but I really like the other pattern better because heartfully is only here once, which is a beautiful centerpiece, and then the molygon as a frame. But the pattern heartfully as a grid is just so lovely. I really wanted you to explore that more. I have a couple others that I can show you. Here's one I did January of 2015. This is a little bit more orderly. And then I did one in February that I thought was awfully pretty. It was actually on Valentine's Day. So here's the one in February with heartfully. Aren't those pretty? Really fun pattern to use in so many different settings. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to show me some of your creations on my Annie's Botangle Alumni Student Facebook page. See you soon. That's it for today's Tangle. Thanks for joining me. If you like these lunchtime tutorials, please give them a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also invite you to check out my website for classes that I have scheduled or to purchase my Tangle tags for your favorite step outs. That's botangle.net. I'm leaving you with some other links too. Zentangle.com, where you can learn more about the Zentangle method from its founders, Rick Roberts and Maria Thomas. You can also visit their store there for a multitude of Zentangle paper tiles, tools, books, and kits. Tanglepatterns.com is that site I talk about where you can explore hundreds of tangle patterns, read about them, and get the step out, which is basically the deconstruction of the pattern. And finally, if you'd like to share your beautiful results with me and my student community, please join Annie's Botangle Alumni Facebook page. We're a private group where we inspire each other with our work and offer tips and useful information about art and Zentangle.